I arrived early to a colleague's birthday and saw her hugging him. I wasn't supposed to be there that early. The party was in Dallas, a birthday thing for one of Emily's coworkers. She'd been talking about it all week. I remember because she kept changing her outfit plans and obsessing over the guest list, even though she normally couldn't care less about her office socials. At first, I thought she was just trying to impress the client. But looking back, maybe she wasn't dressing for business at all. My meetings finished ahead of schedule, so I figured I'd swing by. Thought it'd be a nice surprise. Maybe catch her off guard in a fun way. Be the good husband, the supportive plus one. Even though she told me not to worry about coming until later. Said the client circle would be doing drinks first, and the real party wouldn't kick off until after 8. It was just after 7 when I walked into that place. One of those trendy rooftop spots downtown. Mood lighting, expensive cocktails, the kind of place where people pretend they're more important than they really are. I came in through the side patio entrance, the one near the private event room. Nobody saw me at first. Not even her. She was standing by the bar, back half turned to the room, leaning in close to some guy I didn't recognize at first. Tall, dressed sharp, relaxed posture. Like the room belonged to him. His hand was on the small of her back. Not casually. Not like a coworker helping her reach for a drink. His fingers were resting there like they had every right to be. Familiar. Emily's body language didn't fight it. She leaned into it, like the two of them existed in a bubble. Her head tilted toward his shoulder. Her mouth close to his ear like she was sharing a secret. And when he said something back, I couldn't hear what. She laughed, but not loud. Not like she wanted anyone else to hear. Just enough for him. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a joke between friends. It was a moment. One I wasn't supposed to see. And I stood there, just watching, for a full 5 seconds before she saw me. That's when everything changed. She pulled back just slightly, eyes scanning the room like a radar, and locked onto me. Her face shifted. Not panicked exactly, but startled. The kind of startled that's more about being caught than being surprised. Then, without missing a beat, she smiled. Big. Too big. She threw her head back in this overly dramatic laugh, waved to someone nearby, and patted the guy on the chest like whatever had just happened was all part of the show. Just office banter, just a casual laugh, just two coworkers having fun. And suddenly, she was talking to the people next to them. Animated, bubbly. Like I hadn't just caught her in a moment she clearly didn't want me to see. To anyone else in that room, it looked innocent. To me, it looked rehearsed. I walked in slow, trying to keep my expression neutral. Inside, I was on fire. I made my way toward the bar, nodded at a few people I vaguely recognized from her company's holiday party. And when she noticed I was actually coming over, she finally turned to greet me. All smiles. "Babe, I didn't know you'd be here this early," she said, wrapping her arms around me like nothing was wrong. I nodded, forcing a half smile. Meetings ended early. I looked over at the guy next to her. He was sipping a drink and scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. Calm, confident. Like he didn't have a single reason to be nervous. She gestured between us. "This is Ryan. He works with me on the Newgate project." "Ryan, this is my husband, Michael." Ryan glanced up and extended a hand. "Hey man, good to meet you." We shook hands. His grip was steady. Too steady. Not even a flicker of guilt in his face. If I hadn't seen the moment with my own eyes, I might have believed him. But the way he didn't flinch, that's what got me. He knew I saw them. He just didn't care. Emily steered the conversation to the party. Then someone else came over and pulled her away, and that was it. Just like that, the moment dissolved into the crowd. But I couldn't unsee it. And it wasn't the physical closeness that rattled me most. It was the way she switched gears so fast. Like a light switch. 1 second, she was leaning into a man who wasn't her husband, and the next, she was putting on a show for the room. That kind of pivot doesn't come naturally. Comes from practice. I spent the next hour drifting through the party like a ghost. I watched her from across the room, saw her mingling, laughing, sipping wine, brushing arms with coworkers. But every now and then, she'd glance in my direction, like she was checking to see if I was still watching. And every time she caught my eye, She smiled just a little too hard. Later, on the drive home, she asked if I had a good time. I said I did. I didn't mention what I saw. Not yet. She went on about the new project, about how Ryan was just a friend, about how everyone at work was stressed and blowing off steam. She talked more than usual, filled the car with words like she was trying to crowd out the silence, or the guilt. I didn't say much, just nodded along, let her talk. Let her think maybe I hadn't noticed. But I had. Because in that one moment, that 5-second window where the mask hadn't been on yet, I saw something I couldn't explain away. That wasn't how she looked at me anymore. The drive home from Dallas was quiet, except for the radio murmuring in the background. Emily kept talking, little things like how fun the rooftop was, how Ryan's girlfriend was supposedly super sweet but kind of shy, and how I would have loved meeting everyone if I just stayed longer. I just nodded. Every word she said felt like it was dipped in insulation, designed to make me feel like I'd imagined everything I saw. But I hadn't. I kept seeing it over and over again. Her hand on his arm, his fingers on her back, the way her head leaned toward his like it belonged there, and the way she turned it all into a joke the second she saw me. That performance had been for me. And once you catch someone switching faces like that, it's hard to stop seeing the mask in every conversation afterward. By the time we pulled into our driveway, something in me had changed. It was like a puzzle I didn't even know I'd been working on had finally clicked into place. And suddenly, the little things didn't seem little anymore. Like how her phone had started living screen down on the kitchen counter. First, I thought it was a weird new habit. Everyone does that sometimes, right? But she used to be glued to her phone, always flipping it over when a notification buzzed, always sharing memes or texts from her friends. Now, it sat there like a dead object, untouched, like she didn't want either of us to see what was lighting it up. I remembered the night she got home late and claimed she'd been stuck in traffic. Said there was an accident on the 75. She looked tired, even out of breath, like she'd sprinted up the stairs. But when I checked her company car's mileage the next morning, yeah, I know, kind of paranoid, I noticed she'd gone nearly 40 miles more than her calendar showed. I brushed it off back then, told myself I was overthinking. But now, that extra mileage had a face. It had a name. Ryan. She'd also started buying herself jewelry. Not big things, not flashy. Just little elegant pieces, bracelets, earrings, rings. Nothing with tags. Nothing in gift boxes. I asked once where she got them, and she said, "Oh, just grabbed it while I was out. It was on sale." She never used to do that. And she certainly didn't hide them in the bottom of her gym bag like I'd found one day while looking for my headphones. The gym. God, that one hit me in the gut. For nearly a year, she'd been training for a half marathon. Running had become her therapy, her stress reliever. She used to come home flushed and dripping with sweat, her muddy shoes by the door. But for the past 2 months, those same running shoes sat untouched in the closet, still crusted with dirt from some past trail. Her water bottle remained in the exact spot on the entryway shelf. And yet, she insisted she was really making progress. I even remember her showing me her fitness tracker one night, swearing she'd hit her longest distance yet. But something didn't add up. The graph she showed was weirdly cropped. The battery percentage never changed. So I checked the history on the app the next day while she was at work, and there were no recent entries. None. Just walks from weeks ago. Still, I didn't say anything. What was I going to say? "Hey, I noticed you're not actually running like you say you are, and your jewelry is coming from mysterious places. And oh, by the way, I've started watching the mileage on your car." It all sounded crazy out loud. But inside, I felt like I was drowning in evidence no one else could see. One night, I found a coffee receipt in her coat pocket. 2 drinks, 1 food item. The timestamp was for noon, on a day she said she was locked in back-to-back strategy meetings. "Do you eat alone at cafes during meetings now?" I asked, half joking. She didn't laugh. Just said, "That was from last week, I think," and crumpled it up without another word. Another time, I was reviewing our home security log, something I rarely did unless a package went missing, and I noticed an odd pattern. She'd come home past midnight, more than once, sometimes on weeknights, I thought she was asleep in the guest room during one of her late work nights, but she wasn't even in the house until after 1 a.m. When I asked her where she'd been, she said she was working late at the office. Said they were planning a pitch for a major client and things had just run long. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But that night, I sat on the couch long after she went to bed and tried to tell myself I was just being insecure. That's what people say, right? Don't be the jealous husband. Don't be controlling. Trust until given a reason not to. But I had reasons. I just hadn't put them all together until that night in Dallas. That night became the lens through which everything else came into focus. Even the conversations started to change. The way she dodged certain questions, her mood swings, how she'd be affectionate for one moment, then ice cold the next. How she'd go silent when I mentioned anything related to her coworkers, then recover by saying something like, "Ryan's such a dork," or, "Ugh, we all can't wait for this project to be over." But her eyes said something else. They'd flinch, just for a second, like the lie was still loading in her head. I even noticed she'd stopped posting on social media when she was out. Emily used to post everything, boomerangs of wine glasses clinking, city views, team dinners. But lately it was radio silence. When I asked her why, she said she was taking a break from the noise, said she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But maybe she just didn't want to prove something to me. The biggest blow came when I was scrolling through our shared family iCloud album one night. She'd forgotten her auto-upload settings were still turned on. Buried between **TS and pet photos, I found a single image that made my heart stop. Emily wearing a hotel robe, standing next to a man with his face cropped out. But I didn't need the rest of the image. The windows gave it away. The skyline outside matched the exact view from the Riverside condo tower just outside downtown. I'd been there once, years ago. Same curtains, same view, same building. And that robe? Not from home. Not from any place we'd ever stayed together. The way she smiled in that photo, relaxed, unguarded. It wasn't the look of someone sneaking around in fear. It was the look of someone who thought she was safe. That's when I realized I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't inventing things. I was simply waking up. All the missed calls, the out-of-sync stories, the dead eyes during dinner conversations. It wasn't in my head. The signs had been there, scattered like breadcrumbs. I just hadn't wanted to follow them. Because once you do, there's no unknowing what you find. I sat there that night with the photo still open, my thumb hovering over the screen, my stomach in knots. I didn't confront her. I didn't even delete it. I just saved it quietly and emailed it to myself. Then I made a folder. I gave it a name I never thought I'd use. Proof. And that's where it began, the shift from suspicion to certainty. From questioning everything to documenting everything. Because once you stop making excuses for someone, all that's left are the facts. And the facts never lie. By the time Thursday rolled around, I was no longer just suspicious. I was prepared. I had been living in that gray area between doubt and certainty for weeks, maybe months, and it was eroding me from the inside out. Every smile from Emily felt like a test. Every text she sent with the screen turned away from me felt like a clue. And every time she claimed a late-night strategy session at work, I felt the invisible thread of our marriage fray a little more. That week she'd been especially distant, snapping at me over small things, staying in the guest room under the guise of needing better sleep. When I'd try to reach for her hand at breakfast, she'd pull back and fiddle with her phone instead. She kept insisting that the marathon training was going great, even though her shoes hadn't moved from the closet. The gap between her words and reality had become so wide I could almost step through it. And then, on Thursday morning, she announced she'd be staying late for a strategy session again. Same words, same tone, same deflection. She didn't know I'd already connected her Uber account to my email weeks ago. She didn't know that every time she ordered a ride, the receipt quietly landed in my inbox. At 8:37 p.m., I opened my phone and saw the notification. Trip completed, drop-off at Riverside Condominium Tower. My stomach went cold. That was the same skyline from the photo. Same building. Same place she swore she'd never been. I stared at the address for a long time, the glow of the screen painting my hands blue in the dark kitchen. I could feel my heart thudding in my throat, a rhythm of anger and disbelief. Part of me still wanted to be wrong. Part of me hoped she was meeting a client, that this was all an elaborate misunderstanding. But another part of me, the part that had been keeping *TS and receipts and iCloud photos, knew better. I grabbed my jacket and keys and drove downtown. The city was a blur of neon and tail lights. I don't even remember the songs on the radio or the stoplights I passed. All I remember is parking half a block away from the condo tower and sitting there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My breath fogged the windshield. My palms were slick. I kept telling myself, you don't have to go inside. You don't have to see this. But I couldn't leave. Through the glass lobby doors, I could see the elevator bank. At 9:14 p.m., the elevator dinged and the doors slid open. And there they were. Emily stepped out first. She was holding her heels in one hand like she'd just slipped out of them upstairs. Her hair was slightly mussed, falling around her face in loose waves she didn't have when she left the house. Ryan followed close behind her. His suit jacket, navy blue, expensive, was draped across her shoulders. He reached for her hand to guide her over the marble threshold, like they were stepping into a life together. They weren't laughing. They weren't sneaking. They weren't hiding. They looked like a couple. My entire body went numb. I couldn't even lift my phone to take a picture. I just watched as they paused at the glass doors. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. A small *mate gesture I'd done 1,000 times myself. She smiled up at him, that soft, unguarded smile from the photo. Then, without a flicker of hesitation, they kissed. Not a quick peck. Not an accidental brush. Kiss like no one was watching. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. All the nights alone, the vague excuses, the receipts, the jewelry, the photo. It all crystallized into one moment. The curtain had lifted. The show was over. They walked out into the night, arm in arm, and hailed a car at the curb. I stayed frozen behind the wheel, my mind blank except for one thought. This is it. It's real. On the drive back, I barely felt the road. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. A new photo auto-uploaded to the family iCloud. I almost didn't look, but curiosity won. It was Emily again, in a hotel robe, leaning against a floor-to-ceiling window. The city skyline glittered behind her, unmistakably the same as the one outside Riverside Tower. She wasn't even alone in the frame. Ryan's reflection was caught faintly in the glass. His phone raised as if he'd just snapped the *T. She had never meant for me to see it, but I did. And that was the moment the doubt died. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. I drove home with the photo glowing on my screen, the blue light of it casting her betrayal across the dashboard. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even grip the wheel harder. I just drove, calm and deliberate, like a man carrying something heavy and fragile. When I got back to the house, she wasn't home yet. Her running shoes still sat untouched by the door. The kitchen was dark, quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I set my phone down and stared at it. At the folder I'd labeled proof. At the *TS, the logs, the receipts, and now the final photo. The thing about proof is that it doesn't scream. It doesn't rage. It just sits there, silent and immovable. A weight you can't shake off. I didn't confront her when she walked in later, heels dangling from her fingers just like when she stepped out of the elevator. She smiled faintly, surprised to see me awake. Said something about long meeting, sorry for being late, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. I turned my head so she only caught the edge of my jaw. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and pretended not to. She went upstairs to shower, humming softly like nothing had changed. But something had. I sat there at the dining table long after she closed the bathroom door, staring at the silent evidence glowing in my phone. The facts no longer needed my permission. They didn't need me to believe them. They just were. And for the first time, I stopped wondering if I was crazy. I wasn't crazy. I was married to a stranger. After that night, I stopped reacting and started documenting. I didn't confront Emily. I didn't rage, accuse, or cry. I didn't even ask her where she'd been. Because at that point, I realized something important. She was no longer lying to protect me. She was lying to protect herself. And as long as I let her feel like she was getting away with it, she wouldn't see me coming. So I kept quiet. I kept calm. And I started collecting everything. The next morning, she made eggs and coffee like nothing had happened. She told me Ryan might be moving to another branch in Denver, which she said with just enough fake sadness to sound casual. I nodded and sipped my coffee. I wanted to laugh, honestly. Ryan wasn't moving anywhere, not if she had anything to do with it. That day at work, I logged into every shared account we had. Our iCloud, our bank, the utility dashboards, the GPS app from the company car she still used for work. I pulled the logs for the past 3 months and downloaded everything. Timestamps, route histories, login records. There were patterns I hadn't seen before, recurring addresses that didn't show up on her calendar. One was that same condo building. Another was a boutique hotel outside of town where she'd claimed to have a company retreat. It matched a charge on our Amex that she told me was for training fees. Training, indeed. I started organizing it all in a spreadsheet, labeled by date, time, type of evidence. Uber rides, credit card entries, gas station charges that didn't line up with her supposed meetings. Even ATM withdrawals on days when she told me she was using Apple Pay only. I had never used Excel for anything this personal, but the coldness of it helped. There was something about laying out her betrayal in neat rows and columns that gave me control again. And the more I looked, the more things fell apart. Her phone had been doing things I hadn't even noticed. She'd turned off FaceTime syncing, muted notifications from specific contacts, deleted her call history after certain nights. But she forgot that some apps still cache data. I found old timestamps from rideshare apps she thought were wiped. One ride in particular stood out, a drop-off at the Four Seasons at midnight. She had told me she was at her friend Rachel's apartment that night. I called Rachel a few days later, just to chat, just to check in. She said, "Oh, I haven't seen Emily in forever. She's been swamped with work lately, right?" Right. In the attic, of all places, I found the Real Smoking G*N. We don't even store much up there. But I went looking for an old duffel bag and noticed a shoebox tucked under a pile of winter coats. Inside were postcards, dozens of them, cities I never knew she'd visited, all addressed to her but never mailed. Just little notes, most signed with a single initial R. Some were hotel confirmations. Others were jokes I didn't understand, little inside references that clearly didn't involve me. I checked the dates. A few lined up perfectly with trips she said were female-only work retreats. The handwriting wasn't hers. It was too neat, too deliberate, and the tone was too affectionate to be platonic. I took photos of every card, every message, and I scanned the hotel confirmations into my growing digital archive. At night, I'd pretend to be tired and head to bed early. I'd wait until I heard her slip into the guest room, her new favorite excuse being she needed to decompress alone. And I'd get up and keep working. There's something disorienting about building a timeline of your own betrayal, watching it all click together, realizing you've been living next to someone who had an entirely different world running parallel to yours, one you were never meant to see. I started to notice her habits in real time now, how her voice would get softer when she texted him, even though I was in the room, how she'd step out onto the porch to get some air after dinner, always around the same time. Probably when Ryan was finishing his own evening meetings and they could talk freely. She stopped trying to hide her absences. She'd say, "Don't wait up," and I wouldn't. I'd check the car logs instead. I'd match the mileage to addresses. I'd search through bank records and piece together where she'd eaten, who she dined with, what time she paid. I never told her I was building a case. Because once someone starts lying, you learn fast. Confrontation doesn't get you truth. Preparation does. I copied our shared financials into a secure folder, created a backup of all her photos, including the one from the hotel window, the one she forgot to delete from the cloud. I started moving money into a separate bank account, slowly in amounts that wouldn't trigger questions. I set up alerts on my credit profile, just in case she got reckless and tried to move anything under my name. Every Friday, I updated the timeline. By then, I had more than just digital proof. I had paper trails, voice memos, dates, times, locations. Her entire affair laid out in a format so irrefutable it felt clinical, like a postmortem on our marriage. And the craziest thing? She still didn't know. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed with a message that previewed on the lock screen. It said, "Can't stop thinking about last night. Still tastes like you." She never set that contact to private. She must have gotten careless. I stared at that message for a long time, and for a second, I almost felt nothing, not pain, not rage, just tired, like the betrayal had finally numbed me out. That was the moment I knew I wasn't doing this out of spite. I wasn't trying to ruin her. I wasn't even trying to punish her. I was just trying to protect myself from what she'd become and from who I was becoming in the process. Because when someone betrays you like that, so thoroughly, so casually, it doesn't just make you angry. It makes you question whether you've been deluding yourself for years. Whether every anniversary dinner, every lazy Sunday, every "I love you" was just another scene in a story where you were the only one who didn't know the ending. One night, I sat at the kitchen table and printed everything out. Not just for me, for a lawyer eventually, but also because I needed to see it with my own eyes. The receipts, the photos, the hotel check-ins, the GPS logs. I laid them out like puzzle pieces, like evidence in a courtroom. And once it was all there in front of me, I realized something chilling. There was no room for interpretation anymore. I wasn't insecure. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. I didn't pick the day to prepare. I let the evidence choose it for me. By the time I'd built my timeline out to 2 months, it stopped feeling like a discovery process and started feeling like project management. I had logs, maps, financials, photos, text backups, even surveillance footage downloaded from the condo lobby security cam after calling in a favor. Every piece of the story was documented, cross-referenced, and color-coded. That's when I realized I had enough. I had more than enough. There wasn't a question left that needed answering. No room for doubt. Emily had built a second life, and I had mapped every square foot of it. The only thing left to do was exit cleanly, quietly, with control. So I made a list. First was money. I opened a new checking account under a different bank, transferred just enough from our joint to avoid raising flags. I created a new email, froze my credit, changed my direct deposit through work. She wouldn't notice unless she was actively looking, and by then, it wouldn't matter. Next came property. I found a storage unit, climate-controlled, off the highway, paid in full for 6 months up front. I started boxing up things that were strictly hers. The boutique yoga gear, her books, the wall art she insisted on during the remodel. I labeled the boxes with generic terms: kitchenware, closet, bath. I didn't touch anything sentimental. I wanted her exit to be clean, sterile, not dramatic. Then I scheduled the locksmith. A Tuesday morning appointment. I take that day off. Change the locks, redirect the mail, update the Wi-Fi credentials. Delete her Face ID from the smart lock. Change the garage code. Simple steps. No fanfare. She'd never see it coming. But the part that surprised me the most was how numb I felt doing it. I thought I'd cry packing up her favorite mugs. I didn't. I thought I'd hesitate moving her framed college diploma from the hallway wall. I didn't. It felt transactional. Not cruel, just inevitable. Around that same time, I submitted an anonymous report to her company's compliance department. I know how that sounds. I wasn't trying to be vindictive. But the truth was, Emily and Ryan hadn't just crossed personal boundaries. They'd violated company policy. 2. Relationships between coworkers, especially when they share billable projects and are involved in leadership decisions, are a liability. She'd once been proud of the ethics training she helped build. Ironically, I used that very training to write the complaint. I didn't include names. Not at first. I just gave them enough to look into it. Dates, times, location overlaps, photos if they asked. What I didn't expect was for it to spiral the way it did. See, Ryan wasn't just another coworker. He wasn't some anonymous mid-tier analyst. He was the nephew of one of the company's board directors. I didn't know that until it was too late. A week after I submitted the report, Emily came home quiet. Too quiet. She barely touched her dinner. Said she had a rough day and went to bed early. The next morning, she left even earlier than usual and didn't kiss me goodbye. I knew something was off, so I checked the company's internal directory from my burner account. That's when I saw it. An internal memo had been sent out to senior staff. An ethics audit had been triggered, tied to interpersonal conduct involving management. It was worded carefully, but the writing was on the wall. The investigation didn't stay small. It didn't just focus on Emily and Ryan. The audit expanded quickly, looking into leadership emails, reimbursements, conflicts of interest, even client communications. A week later, Ryan's name disappeared from the project tracker. By the following Monday, his email auto-replied with a generic, no longer with the company notice. Emily didn't mention it, not even once. But she started coming home late again, too late, and not for the same reasons. She wasn't cheating anymore. Not in the romantic sense. She was scrambling. CYA mode. You could see it in the way she pored over her laptop after dinner, the emails flying. How she stopped sleeping. How her hands shook while making coffee. She was unraveling. And I watched it happen with eerie calm, knowing I hadn't even played my final card yet. The hardest part was pretending not to notice. When she asked if I thought people were out to get her, I told her she was probably imagining it. When she said someone had misinterpreted a hotel bill, I just shrugged. That's asterisk CKs. I said, hope it blows over. But it didn't. She was pulled into meetings, put on temporary leave. Not fired yet, but hanging by a thread. I overheard part of a call one evening. Something about HR reviews, previous travel claims, and whether she had properly disclosed her interpersonal engagements. Her words, not mine. She looked pale after that call, like she was seeing the edge of a cliff for the first time. What I hadn't planned for, what I truly didn't see coming, was how far the fallout would reach. The audit unearthed a handful of unrelated misconduct issues across her department. Travel fraud, favoritism, 2 resignations, partner's suspension. Suddenly, her affair wasn't just an affair. It was the first domino in a chain that no one could stop. And I realized I wasn't the only one she'd betrayed. Her company had trusted her. Her team had admired her. I remember seeing her win an award at last year's conference, beaming as she shook hands with the CFO. Now, her name was a liability. Cautionary tale. That part? That hit me in a way I didn't expect. Because somewhere in the wreckage, I still remembered the version of her I fell in love with. The one who used to leave notes in my suitcase before work trips. The one who helped stray animals on the side of the road. The one who used to cry at wedding toasts and hug me so tightly I'd forget what we were even fighting about. And now here she was, reduced to whispers in an office hallway. A mess of her own making. But still, I didn't say anything. I let her unravel. Because what no one tells you about betrayal is this. You can survive it with revenge, or you can survive it with clarity. I chose the latter. My silence wasn't indifference. It was precision. And when the time came, I'd cut the cord with the same cold elegance she once used to lie to my face. On a quiet Sunday, I laid out everything on the dining table. Photos, receipts, GPS logs, the robe photo enlarged. No shouting, no drama. Emily stood frozen. I handed her the address of the storage unit, a list of utilities transferred, and a schedule for her exit. The locks were already changed. She didn't argue. There was nothing left to defend. The separation was clean, quiet, and irreversible. The ethics probe confirmed the affair and more. Ryan was fired, Emily suspended, then let go. I found older letters in that shoebox, revealing her betrayal started long before Ryan. She hadn't just cheated recently, she'd built a history of it. I finalized the divorce without theatrics, moved into a small apartment downtown, and slowly rebuilt. I wasn't paranoid. I just finally listened to the truth the facts had been telling me all along.